Good afternoon, everybody. We're so pleased to be here to have the opportunity to celebrate all the different festivals that our different religions have missed during this pandemic. Our wonderful Lord Mayor, Hazel Chu, in conjunction with Adrian from the Dublin City Interfaith Forum, brought forth this wonderful idea that we should come together to celebrate. Lord Mayor, thank you so much. It's a privilege to be here. And thank you.
Thank you, Hilary, and thank you to everyone here. Happy Hanukkah, is that what we say today? So it's wonderful to have everyone here today. And Sarah, who is actually a colleague of mine in the Greens as well, it's good to see you. I think this is what we wanted, to make sure we can have the community come together, to have friends and colleagues come together in celebration, which we have all missed this year. And as we celebrate Christmas coming up, I think it's important to remember all the other faiths that have been working so hard in a community, helping those on the front line and being frontline themselves. They've been in the community, providing care, providing food, providing hope to people. So it's massively important that we recognize hope and faith from people, but recognize that I think when we look at religion, it's not just about a higher power, but it's about people around you. So it's really lovely to work with Adrian and the youth group in the Interfaith Forum to work with everyone around us, to work with our friends and colleagues. And on that's why we have Hanukkah today and celebrating Hanukkah. We will have 4 more days of celebrations. 4 more days. So it's great to have everyone here. I hope that when the house opens back up, we will be able to have you inside the house with celebrations. But for the meantime, we'll be doing it here. So thank you.
So, like many of the faiths, Judaism has missed out on all of the major holidays. And the first one we missed out on was Pesach, or Passover. And this takes place at the time in Egypt when the Jewish people who were living there had been invited down by Pharaoh 400 years ago. They had become quite a big multitude. And Pharaoh was very concerned that the people might side with an enemy nation that came to attack him. And so he decided to enslave them to keep their numbers down. And then he also decreed that there should be no more children born. So this was, as you can imagine, very difficult. So in order to save baby Moses, whose parents were Jewish, Amram and Jochebed, they hid Moses in a little basket on the Nile. And his sister Miriam watched over him. Pharaoh's daughter came to bathe in the Nile, and she saw this little baby, and she took him home because he was all on his own. And he grew up in the palace. And one day he saw that an Egyptian overseer was beating the Hebrew slave. And he went out and he fought with him, and he actually killed him. And then he became very afraid, and he ran away to the land of Midian because he was afraid he would be killed. So Moses flees to Midian, and he joins the family of Jethro. And Jethro was the priest of Midian, and he became a shepherd, and he was looking after the flock and all of that sort of thing. And he married Jethro's daughter, Zipporah. And one day when he's out looking after the sheep, he sees a fire, and a bush is on fire, but the leaves are not burning. And a voice calls from the bush and tells him to take off his shoes because the place he's standing on is a holy place. So he takes off his shoes, and a voice comes from the bush and tells him that he is God, and he is telling him to go back to Egypt to get Pharaoh to let the children of Israel leave. So Moses is a bit worried about that. He's not sure he'll be able to speak properly. Anyway, he goes back, and he and his brother Aaron go to Pharaoh to ask Pharaoh to let the people go. And of course, Pharaoh says, no. And they go away, and they come back again, and they ask, let the people go. And he says, no. So then God sends 10 plagues. Can I remember them all now? There's blood, lice, wild animals, boils. But the last one, the second last one is darkness. And the darkness is so thick that you can't walk around even in it. But in the land of Goshen, there's no darkness where the Hebrew slaves are living. And so still Pharaoh will not let the people go. So then the next night, the terrible plague of the death of the firstborn. And it was the firstborn of all the people, all the animals, the firstborn of everything. But the Jews had been told to put blood on the lintels of the doorposts. And so the angel of death knew to pass over. And that's how the name of the festival comes about. The festival in Hebrew is called Pesach. But in English people or other, it's called Passover, from the story of passing over, the angel of death passing over. So when Pharaoh discovers his firstborn son, the firstborn of all of his different wives, they were all dead, he told the people just to go. And so they left, and they had sort of baked some dough, but the dough hadn't had a chance to rise. And so it turned out like a flat biscuit, which is called matzah. And we have a matzah in here, just to show you what a matzah looks like, so that you know. So the children of Israel are running away. You see, this is a flat one. The children of Israel are going through the desert. Oops, now we've got a broken one. That's fine. Excellent. Perfect. But it has to be broken to eat anyway. I wouldn't recommend you eat that one. And during the night, a pillar of flame guides them. And during the day, a pillar of cloud covers them. And so that they can't be seen in the distance, but they can still see where they're going. And they come to the banks of the Sea of Reeds. And when they get there, there's all this water, and they don't know what to do. And Moses tells Nachshon to walk into the water, and he goes into the water up to here. And when he does that, the sea begins to split. And Pharaoh's army, because Pharaoh had changed his mind, he was going to lose all these slaves who were doing all the building work and so on. So Pharaoh's army come thundering after him, and they're very frightened, and they go into the water, and the water rises up on either side and makes a pathway for them to go through. And Pharaoh's army are coming after them, and when they reach the other side, the waters close over, and so Pharaoh's army are drowned. So that's the story of Passover. And then 7 weeks later to the day, we have the festival of Shavuot. And the festival of Shavuot celebrates the time when the children of Israel have reached Mount Sinai, and Moses goes up Mount Sinai for 40 days and 40 nights, and he receives the 10 Commandments. And the 10 Commandments are as relevant today as they were all those centuries ago, millennium ago. And so every year we celebrate Passover. We have the matzah, which I've just shown you. We have wine. We tell the story of the Exodus from Egypt. And that's the celebration of Shavuot. It's also a harvest festival. And the Book of Ruth is read at that time because that also coincides with the harvest festival. And Ruth, as I'm sure most of you know, was a Moabite woman. And Naomi, there was a famine in the land of Judah, and there was food in Moab. Naomi and Elimelech go to Moab, and they have their two sons with them, Chilion and Machlon. And eventually Machlon and Chilion get married to two Moabite women, Ruth and Orpah. But after a time, Elimelech dies, and then both the sons die. And Naomi wants to go back to her own people, to the land of Judah, because her husband died. And when she kisses her daughters-in-law and tells them to go back to their families and to get new husbands and make a life for themselves, Orpah gives her a kiss and goes. But Ruth says, don't ask me to leave you. Where you go, I will go. Your people will be my people. And so Ruth goes back with Naomi to the land of Judah. And they live together there. And Ruth used to go and glean in the fields. Now, to glean in the fields means to pick up the like the wheat or whatever the harvest is. And when she's there, Boaz sees that she's there, and he asks the foreman and the workmen to leave extra around the edge so that she can take as much as she needs. Eventually, she marries Boaz, and they have a son called Obed. And Obed has a son called Jesse. And Jesse has a son called David, who eventually became King David. And King David was born on Shavuot, and he died on Shavuot. And that's why we have the celebration of Shavuot. So we have the Ten Commandments, and we have the Harvest Festival. Now, there are three main harvest festivals, and that people used to go up to the temple in Jerusalem. All the men had to go to the temple in Jerusalem, and they would bring the produce of their harvests with them. So Pesach is one, Shavuot is the other, and we'll come to Sukkot in a moment. The next festival that we missed out, and these are the high holy days, so important for us. We have Rosh Hashanah, which is the New Year. And it's funny to think of the New Year coming in the 7th month, but that's how it is in Judaism. And the 7th month falls usually around September, up to the end. September, October are our high holy days, and they move around because the calendar is a lunar solar calendar. Sorry. So the festival Rosh Hashanah, the New Year, is the birthday of the world. It's also a time of introspection, because our New Year is not like the secular New Year with fireworks and parties and things like that. There are 10 days, the 10 days of penitence. During these 10 days, you go around to people and you ask them to forgive you for anything you might have done wrong. So that's a kind of a preparing time, and that culminates with Yom Kippur. But Rosh Hashanah also, it takes in the time when Abraham was commanded to sacrifice his son Isaac. And he takes Isaac up to the top of Mount Moriah. And he and on the way, that Isaac is saying, well, I can see the wood, Father, and I can see the fire, but where is the lamb we're going to slaughter? And so when they get to the top of Mount Moriah, Abraham builds an altar, and he tells Isaac that he's actually the sacrifice. And he binds Isaac and he puts him on top of the altar. And he's about to slit his throat, and an angel comes and tells him not to do that. He mustn't. He's proved to God that he's willing to obey all God's rules, and the angel says, look, there's a ram in the thicket, and the ram in the thicket is where it was sacrificed, and the blowing of the shofar, which is this item, this is the shofar, is a commandment. We must listen to the blowing of the shofar, and Michael is going to blow the shofar for us.
Tekiya Shavarim Churva Tekiya Tekiya Gedola.
Yom Kippur is the Day of Atonement, and it refers to the annual observances of repentance. Now, I said before that at Rosh Hashanah, for those 10 days, you repent. Sins that you've committed against God, you can what's this? If you sin against God, you can get forgiveness for that in the synagogue. But if you sin against a person, you have to go to that person and you have to say to them, I'm so sorry. If I have offended you, please forgive me. So you must do this. And so at the end of it's a 25-hour fast, no food, no water. And at the end of that fast, the shofar, Michael just blew, is sounded to say that the fast has ended. Then we come to the festival of Sukkot, and that's the last of the 3 festivals which were called the Shalosh Raglayim, where you go up to the temple in Jerusalem to give thanks. During Sukkot, we have 4 species that are particularly relevant. We have a palm, a long palm, and we have the myrtle leaf, and the myrtle leaf is shaped like an eye, and the long palm is like your spine, and the willow leaf is shaped like your mouth, and we have the etrog, and this is a beautiful fruit. It's a citrus fruit, which has a tiny little pitum on the end, and you mustn't break that off. So if you take the palm, which is like the spine, the myrtle that's like an eye, and the willow that's like the lips, and the palm and the etrog, which is like the heart, you put them all together and you wave them in different directions, north, south, east, west, up and down, and it's like the whole body. You've got your eyes to see, your mouth to praise, the spine, and your heart, and with all of those you're praising God and thanking Him. And during Sukkot, we are commanded to build sukkahs, because that's the plural. It's to remember the time when the children of Israel were in the wilderness and they dwelt in Sukkot, and for 8 days you live in a sukkah. Well, not in this climate, but in warm climates they can do that. But if you have your own little sukkah, you go out and you just make the blessings for eating and things like that during that time. And at the end of Sukkot comes Simchat Torah. And Simchat Torah is a wonderful festival. It celebrates our Torah, which are the 5 books of Moses. And I didn't bring one with me, but it's a scroll, and it celebrates that you come to the end of reading it. I think it's split into 53 portions, one for each week of the year. And when you come to the end, there's a great celebration that you've finished it. But then, because you've finished it, you've also got to start it. And so you finish with Deuteronomy, and then you go back to Genesis, and it's all got to be rolled, but most synagogues will have 2 scrolls at least, and you can read from the end of one and the beginning of the other. And there's a great celebration because you've achieved this wonderful thing. And now we're coming to Hanukkah, and Anna is going to tell us all about the story of Hanukkah.
Many years ago, the land of Israel was ruled by a wicked king named Antiochus. King Antiochus counted many Jews among his subjects who, like many of us today, lived their lives according to Jewish custom and tradition. Just like us, they celebrated Shabbat and marked the festivals of Passover, Sukkot, and Shavuot. However, unlike us, our Jewish ancestors worshipped at the ancient temple in Jerusalem. This was the holiest of holy places, the center of Jewish life. King Antiochus did not want to rule over a nation of lots of different religions and cultures. He wanted to rule one nation with one religion and one culture. He wanted all the people of his land to live the way he lived and pray the way he prayed, which was according to Greek custom. This meant that he did not want the Jewish people to dress, worship, or eat differently. Under King Antiochus, the practice of Judaism was completely abolished. He forbade the Jews from celebrating Shabbat and didn't let them observe festivals. He also forbade them from reading or studying Torah. But perhaps the worst of all, King Antiochus didn't allow Jewish worship in the temple by setting up idols and altars to Greek gods. He turned it into a place that became unholy. Many Jews were afraid for their lives and felt forced to follow the king's order, but one group of brave souls, the Maccabees, decided that they would not submit to the king. They would not worship foreign gods or give up their Jewish way of life. They were determined to take back their temple and defend their religious freedom. Compared with the king's army, the Maccabees were small in number but mighty in spirit. With faith and relentless determination, the Maccabees fought hard and against all odds, won a stunning victory over the king's army. The Maccabees successfully took back the temple, but were heartbroken to find their holy space had been desecrated. They got to work cleaning and purifying it, removing all the foreign idols and altars that had been set up inside. They lovingly cleansed every inch of the temple, and then, on the 25th day of the month of Kislev, they held a glorious rededication ceremony. The word Hanukkah means dedication, and it comes from the moment when the temple was triumphantly returned to the Jewish people. The most famous story about the rededication tells that when the Maccabees walked into the temple, they found only enough oil to light the menorah for one day. But miraculously, the small of oil lasted for 8 days, which is exactly how long it took to prepare new oil. Today, our celebration of Hanukkah lasts for 8 days. We light 8 candles on the Hanukkah, 1 candle for the first night, 2 for the second night, and so on. And we eat latkes and other tasty food fried in oil. With every Hanukkah candle we light, we illuminate 2 important messages. We must always work to find light in the darkness, and we must always work to keep the light of religious freedom burning for all people for all time.
The light in the temple at the time in the temple at the time, this is what the menorah would have looked like. It's a 7 branch, one for each day of the week. However, following Hanukkah, we've got an 8 branch. And this is the shamus. And the shamus is the servant that lights all the others. So, Beverly is wearing a Hanukkah jumper. This is what the menorah looks like when it has all of its candles. And tonight, which is the first night, you have this one, and then you light this one, and then you light that one. And Rabbi Lent will be here this evening, and he's going to do it
at the steps
on the steps of the mansion house, which is something that we do annually. Now Malcolm is going to tell you all about the dreidels and the dreidel game.
The dreidel is something the children play with. On the dreidel there are 4 letters. There's a nun, which is Ness.
It's a miracle.
It's a miracle. Gimel, which is Gadol, means great. Hayam, Jam, Lecherutenu. And this really means a great miracle happened there. That's the 4 words. And the miracle was, of course, as Anna explained, was there was enough oil in the temple for only one day, one night. But in fact, that oil lasted for 8 days. So that is why we have the menorah, sometimes called the Chanukia, with the 8 candles. One for tonight, and then each night another one. So at the end of the 8 days, we have the light of 8 candles shining in our home. And indeed, there is one in Aras Unuchtaran as well. The final night, the shamus, the servant, is kept light, so you have 9 candles, but that's a special offer which is given. And that's the history behind the dreidel. And
the other thing behind the dreidel is that when the Jews were hiding in caves before the temple was conquered, they were forbidden to study, but they would go to the caves to study. And if the children saw that the Roman soldiers were coming, they would bring out their little tops to play a game.
There's a traditional song for Hanukkah called Ma'otzor, which is known far and wide as Rock of Ages. And I'm going to sing you an Italian Renaissance version of it. Ma'otzor Yeshuoti Lechanae Nishabeach Tikon Beit Tefiloti Shantoda Ezabeach Leit Tachit Badeach Mitzor HaMeabeach Azet Mor Lismir Mizmor Chanukot HaMizbeach Leot Tachit Badeach Mitzor HaMeabeach Azet Mor Bishir Mizmor Chanukah HaMizbeach.
Now the last word is with me. You've heard the story of Hanukkah told beautifully by Anna. But I'm going to reminisce about the times of Hanukkah where I spent my childhood in Belfast, very briefly. It's been the tradition that on each night of Hanukkah, the children receive a small present. Whenever I was a child, we used to get sixpence a first night, another sixpence until the last night. We all got sixpence. But more importantly than the sixpence was the penny bar of Cadbury's chocolate, and on the last night, the tuppenny bar of Cadbury's chocolate. My sister and my brother and I were very fortunate that we had a very beautiful aunt who came from Dublin, and when she married my uncle, she still seemed to have an enormous amount of bars of Cadbury's chocolate, which of course is only the best when it's made in Dublin. So this probably puts the reason why I am slightly diabetic, thanks to this aunt of mine. We had concerts in Belfast where the children sang and they danced, and it was a very major festival indeed. In 5 days' time or so will be the new month of Tevet in the Jewish calendar. And it's a tradition in every synagogue that we say a prayer for the new month. And I've picked a few things out of this. We pray that we have a long life of peace, welfare and blessing, a life of prosperity, and at this particular time that we're living through, a life of good health. We also, in 2 weeks' time and 3 weeks' time, we have Christmas and the New Year. And it would be remiss of me not to wish people a happy, a peaceful, a joyous, and most importantly, a healthy Christmas and New Year. And finally, I'd like to wish you keep well, keep safe, and please, please follow the government and health services guidance at this terrible time, so that we will meet inside the Mansion House next year, and we will meet in your churches as well next year. And I wish you all well.